Hello, everyone. This is Minhee Don, program coordinator for NRCAL, and we have Dr. Wren with us again. So welcome back to our fourth webinar now in the Educational Technology webinar series. I'm sure by now you're familiar with all of the instructions, announcements. I will go over them quickly before I pass it on to Wren. Today's presentation is on HyperDocs. Visual audio image release notification, just letting you know that we are recording this webinar. Please turn off your audio just so that we don't have any background noise that's being picked up in the recording. If you have any questions during the presentation, please share your questions in the chat and we will have a Q&A session at the end. And of course, all of the recorded webinars are available on our website on the distance learning page. And the feedback form, I will share this link with you in the chat towards the end. Please take a moment to provide us with your feedback. Okay, and I will pass this on to Hue-An.
Thank you, Minhee. Welcome, 4 in a series of 8. So that I'm making a lot of friends as we go through, right? So it's kind of nice. So today's presentation, as Minhee said earlier, is going to be on HyperDocs for student learning. And this is the presentation. I'm going to put the link to the presentation in the chat box. So if you are familiar with Zoom and you know where that chat box is, then go ahead and go to the chat box. I activated it, so it's a little orange button should pop up for you so you can see it. I see one person's already, there we go, we're jumping on. So welcome. Again, if you are joining us probably not for the first time, you're familiar with the Zoom tips and tricks and how to pull the presenter screen in and out. And you're probably looking at, let me see here real quick. Yeah, you're probably looking at my Zoom screen here. And if you're familiar, you know that it overtakes whenever we share. So you can just slide the edge of this over and move your little participant and your chat menu over here. I don't know if you guys know, I'm sure you've seen at the bottom of your participant menu, you have some gestures here that if you need help or you want me to slow down, by all means, please use those gestures. All right, so a little bit about myself. I have a lot of jobs, and I think the reason why I'm in demand now, especially now, is because I have a lot of expertise in using technology for instructional purposes. And I've been able to do a lot of research in the balancing of both good teaching strategies with technology and their practice. So by doing that, I kind of get pulled in different directions. My full-time job, though, is I work at the Garden Grove Unified School District as an instructional technology teacher on special assignment. I also teach for Cal State Fullerton, UCI, and then I've been doing the webinars for NRCAL for a few years now. So I really enjoy working with Cal State Fullerton in that aspect. But I teach in the master's program at Cal State Fullerton. If you're interested in something like that, I put a little link right here. I do enjoy that job quite a bit because it's quite a lot of fun learning all these new tools and teaching them. So in the past, I've asked you how distance learning is going for you. And I wanted to know, like, where are you feeling? So here's my little list of emojis and some feelings that go with the emojis. If you could, in the chat box, let me know how it's going for you. Maybe right now distance learning is going great because you're done for the year and you're just super excited that you don't have to do it anymore. Maybe you're just getting the hang of it. So give me a number 1 through 9. And if the emoji that truly represents how you feel isn't on this list, by all means, please stick a different emoji in the chat window. but I want to see how it's going for you guys and how you're able to use some of the tools that we've been talking about, but then also, you know, trying to get into the swing of things as the students are starting to make the way. Okay, so I see a lot of 5s, which is great. So the way I see 5 is it's not that you're totally enjoying it, but then you're not miserable, which is great. I think that's a wonderful place to be, right? And if it were me, I would be a 9 right now because I enjoy this kind of thing. I'm actually going to start teaching a summer program for UCI in June. And I'm so excited. It's going to be completely online. And to me, that's something that's my dream, right? I want to be able to engage and meet and teach completely online with students. So I'm very excited about it. So I would be a 9 because I'm just very excited about it. Okay, so many of you are joining us today because you've been following the webinar series, but how many of you are actually joining us because you're familiar with HyperDocs or you've heard of HyperDocs? So this was a topic that's usually brought up a lot. There's a huge misconception with HyperDocs, and I'll address that as soon as we get deeper into the session. But just out of curiosity, how many of you are here because the title of the webinar is HyperDocs? You're familiar with it, you've heard of them, but you've never really taught, so you're interested in diving a little deeper, or you're following along, you've never heard of them, you're interested in learning something new. So in the chat box, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at with your comfort level with HyperDocs? Have you never heard of them before? You've heard of them, you've seen them, or you've used them? Okay, lots of ones. So you guys are going to love HyperDocs. I think HyperDocs is something that once built can be used for quite some time. Awesome. Okay. Let's move on to what is a HyperDoc. A HyperDoc is an interactive Google document or Microsoft document. The reason why we put Microsoft in there is now Microsoft is online, just like Google is. It doesn't have the functionalities that Google does, and it has some of the interactive collaboration features, but it is possible to do HyperDocs in Microsoft Word online. So just if you're a Microsoft district, that's an option for you as well. But the key word in this definition is that it is interactive, and it changes the learning experience for students. That's one of the things about HyperDocs that has made it so wonderful to adopt, because people really see the difference in the HyperDocs when they use them with their students. The huge misconception that I was talking about earlier, HyperDocs versus a doc with links. Right? Just a regular document with links. So many people think a HyperDoc is just a document with links, so you can just click on things and where they need to go. But the purpose of a HyperDoc is to follow a lesson design, a model, a lesson of good instruction, and a lesson of good pedagogy. So that's why with a HyperDoc, it's so important to know that you have in a HyperDoc opportunities for collaboration. You have in a HyperDoc the ability for students to work and create things in the HyperDoc. In a HyperDoc, you give students an opportunity to reflect on their learning, because from what we've talked about earlier, especially with the digital portfolio presentation, we talked about how reflection is key to learning and how that will solidify the experience for students. And then we talk about in a HyperDoc how this gives students an opportunity to connect. One of the most beautiful things about educational technology is that we can do things we were never able to do before with technology. It allows us to break down the walls so that the expert is not just in our room. We are not limited by the expert and the knowledge that our teacher has. Now we can go out and find expertise elsewhere. So by connecting outside of our classroom, we are really giving our students more than we've ever been able to give them in the past. And HyperDocs can do that besides a traditional document. So some benefits to HyperDocs, as I've been crowdsourcing this, fewer lectures, lots fewer lectures. The whole point of a HyperDoc is for you not to lecture, to take your content and put it into a document. More face-to-face interaction. Now, when we're not in a remote situation, when students do a HyperDoc, you get them going and you set them and they start working, and then you walk around the room and work in small groups with students. That's the purpose of a HyperDoc. It's not to let them go and then, you know, hope that they follow the model, but you're working with individual groups of students or individual students as you're moving around the room as the other students are working on the rest of the HyperDoc. In a remote situation, HyperDocs are a phenomenal way to give and assign asynchronous work for those students who may struggle to get to your class at a certain time. I know I've mentioned before that we cannot expect all of our students to be on Zoom present with an adult at a certain time every single day. It's really difficult. And if you think about the equity in our students, many of them are sharing a device. Many of them are holding up and taking care of the family while their parents are still working. So a lot of unknowns out there as we're in this remote learning and distance education type of school. But with HyperDocs, we can meet those needs by offering asynchronous learning opportunities. And that's what HyperDocs does. And that's why I find it to be so valuable during this remote learning opportunities. So let's take a look at a couple of some of our samples. Later, I will be giving you a resource that has a whole bunch of HyperDocs, just sample after sample. And the ladies who invented this, the HyperDocs, their philosophy is called Teachers Give Teachers. They are inherently they want to start a movement where teachers are just giving what they do, which is exactly why whenever I give you a presentation, when I do a presentation, I will give you my presentation. You are welcome to use any part of my slides. You're welcome to use any of my presentations, and you are welcome to share them out. That's the nature of ed tech, is that we share. And so with Teachers Give Teachers, every single HyperDoc that they've created is out there for teachers to use. So let's take a look at a couple of these HyperDocs that we can show you the example. So here is the 6-word memoir. It's a HyperDoc, and what it is the teacher would give this HyperDoc to their students, and it would work like a lesson, and the students would just work on down the document. So on this first one, they talk about your life story in 6 words. Yep, that's all you get. Here's the learn part of the lesson. These are examples, right? Here's the learn part. So if you click here, it'll take you to the presentation that the teacher has already created for her student. Then you see more samples, and here's the work part. They get to work. Practice by writing a few here first. Just words, right? A few 6-word memoirs. Create an image to represent your memoir. So this is a part for them to create. And then they publish. So they can publish a book. They can, I think they have a book creator here as their way of publishing together. And then they can see other people. So they're sharing it with each other so they can see other people's work. If you choose, here's an extension for those, I don't know what you call them. I call them early finishers, those students who are always done soon. And it's not like they're rushing through the work, but they get it. They don't need as much scaffolding as some of the others. There's an extension activity for them to just capitalize on that curiosity, right? So here are some other ways to continue the work if you wanted to. But this is a perfect example of a HyperDoc. It just moves through the lesson and gives students an opportunity to really work on what they're trying to do, the lesson objective being the 6-word memoir. Here's another one. It's a 5-sentence poem, and it has the same template in that they learn, they explore, they write, they apply the learning, and then I'm sure there's a way, publish a poem on your digital portfolio, right? So they have a portfolio. When they're done, they're sharing it out. So really great, easy way of creating these types of lessons. So we'll head back to this slide in just a few minutes. Actually, I'm going to share the folder that has all of these plus a lot more. I just happened to pick a few of these out. Oh, I wanted to show you actually this game board. Same concept of the HyperDocs with the lesson and so forth, but now it's set up like a game board. This is actually done in Google Docs. So they just created a table and they put all these different squares in there and made it like a game board. So you can go through and check out all the game boards. So if you wanted this, all you would have to do is click on File, make a copy, and you can have a copy of it and you can add or delete things that you want to keep or you don't want to keep. So there's a few there. Let's take a look at the HyperDoc template and the reason why it's so effective and why if you don't adhere to this, you're not really doing HyperDocs. The pedagogy behind it is why it is so effective. When you are on this presentation, if you click on this picture, you'll see a link to the basic HyperDoc lesson plan. And this link here is where most people would build their presentation, right? So it would create a Google Doc, and then you go in and you fill in the details based on the prompts that you would get. So if I were creating a HyperDoc, I would go in and I would be thinking, okay, what are my lessons today and how do I want to teach them? First, I need to engage them. First, I need to create that hook. What am I going to get them excited about, right? Then, how are they going to explore? What are some different things that allows them to explore the content that I'm teaching? And then, how will I explain the objective? Like giving them opportunities to explain exactly what it is that I want them to learn. So if I'm teaching a lesson on cultural emphasis and cultural symbols within our country, then this is the part that I'm focusing on that. How do the students apply what they learn? Because so often when we lecture, we engage them, we give them the material, we explain, and then it stops. And oftentimes people see the apply part as the writing down or the workbook or the worksheets or anything like that. And that's usually a place where students can apply things, but we want them to use web tools, those web 2.0 tools, Google Docs, Google Slides. I have a whole list of different tools that you can use for them to apply what they learn. Because just like you would when you're learning something new, if I don't give you an opportunity to test it out and try it out, you're not going to be able to remember as much of it as if I had. So we want our students to try and apply. Then share. Give them an opportunity to publish and share and have that authentic voice. I talked about this when we were doing digital portfolios. When a student knows that the audience is just their teacher versus the audience being their peers or the audience being the community at large or their audience being their family and friends, it's a different work ethic. It's a different type of product that comes out of it. So it's important to give them that opportunity to share. And it makes their learning meaningful. It makes their work meaningful. When they're doing something and they want to put out their best work, give them that opportunity to share, because all that work will go to nothing if it's just to the teacher who then gives a grade and then gives it back. So give that opportunity for them to share and publish their voice. And then reflect. We talked about earlier how reflect works and how that solidifies the learning for our students, because they get to think back. The reason why I do so many presentations in EdTech is because this is my version of reflecting on what I do. When I'm building these presentations, I reflect on how these tools work, and I reflect on how I can use this to teach. And that's what our students do when they do a reflection. And a reflection can be something as simple as answering a journal prompt, as simple as describing what they created, as simple as having a conversation with another student about what they created. That could be a reflection, just an opportunity to go back and think about what they learned. And then for those early finishers, like the ones that I used to have a lot in my classroom, some more extension activities, because they're going to need more. If they're really interested and you've created an engaging lesson, they're going to want more. So this template right here, with it being a Google Doc, all you have to do is file, make a copy. And when you make a copy, you can delete all of this extra text. I usually keep the text and I add it in between, just to remind me. And then before I give it to the students, I delete these the text boxes here so that the students have more work room. For those of you who are creating, if you ever wanted to add a hyperlink to something, what you would do is you would highlight the word and then you would click on the chain link here, and that would give you the opportunity to add a hyperlink. In Google Slides, you can add a hyperlink to another slide, or you can add a hyperlink to a website outside of where you're working. So that's how you would add links to the slide. It works the same way here. We just can't see it because this isn't my document, so I can't be adding all these different links to it. But this is the Google Docs version of that template. This is the slides version of that template. I like slides. I like slides because for my littles, I have younger students, it's easier for them to see. this is that first box at the top, literally the exact same concept. And each slide is one section, right? So each slide is how you would do that particular section. And so when I give it to the students, it makes it so much easier for them to just stay on one slide. And then also for when I build it too, because building it would make it confusing if I had everything on one running document. So when you make a copy of this slide, you can just build the engagement part right here. And it can be one activity or two activities. Usually one. I would stick with one, especially if you have younger learners. And then maybe the Explore, you have a few resources to give them different perspectives. Maybe have a video or an article or an infographic or a newspaper or something like that, that they can put in there so that kids can learn more about the general topic. And then here, this is the Explain. One piece of content, one thing that tells what would normally be your slideshow presentation or what would normally be the video, the YouTube video that shows them how to do it. And then opportunities to apply, opportunities to share, opportunities to reflect, and then opportunities to extend the learning. So that's the template. Let's talk about the hardest part about designing a HyperDoc. On the next two slides, and I'm going to go over each one, the next two slides is a list of tools. Now, this is not the only list of tools. It's actually quite comprehensive, and I'm going to be even more adamant about giving you time to explore on this one because there are so many resources to explore, but at least can give you a chance to start. Okay, so I'm looking at the design of this HyperDoc lesson, and we talked earlier, the first start is to engage, to create that hook, right? We're gonna make that learning meaningful. What are some different things that you can put in that engage box? Well, everybody starts with videos. I always start with videos. I just feel like a video tells you so much, and the generation that we are teaching now, and the generation that some of you may be, you are a generation of videos. That's what you grew up on. I mean, everyday life revolves around videos. My husband just replaced the sink in our bathroom, and he YouTubed it to learn how to do it. So everything we do is video based. So I like using videos any way I can. And if I can use a video to spark engagement, then it's more suited to our learners' needs. I was going to teach a unit on photosynthesis and how plants need light to be able to create food for themselves. And all I did was put in a video of sunflowers that follow, a time-lapse video of sunflowers that follow the sun throughout the course of the day. And then I asked students, why is it doing that? Just a wonderful way of doing that. Wonderopolis, if you guys aren't familiar with that, is a really cute little website. It's a website that talks about things that we wonder about. Why do bats fly at night? Why do bats sleep upside down? Why do this and that? So just a bunch of different topics there that you can add. A really, really exhausted list, like a huge list. Flipgrid, great way, and not necessarily just the main Flipgrid, but their Disco library. For those of you who are not familiar, I just found out the other day, Disco library means discovery library. Had no idea. So the Disco library looks like this, where you go in and you just see a bunch of different topics. They have partnerships with all these different organizations like Wonderopolis, Code.org, the World Wildlife Animal Association, something like that. But they have partnerships with these huge organizations that do so much. So it's a great way to be able to get in there and find content that's interesting. I'm doing a unit on animal adaptations, and I went in and I found a video about sea stars. And it's one of the park rangers from a beach, and she's just talking about sea stars. And my question was, why does a sea star need the little suction cups at the bottom of his, why is that there? And it's just to ask them and get them to respond back to me. So that's one question that I found from the Disco library in Flipgrid. If you're using Google Classroom, a great way to engage is a classroom discussion prompt. Ask a question. Do not ask a yes, no question, because that doesn't really engage discussion, right? Ask a question that opens it up for people to have different viewpoints, for people to have different ideas and build upon. Current events. That's a great way to start and engage a lesson. If you're teaching about, actually, the most current event right now, the COVID-19 school closures. That is probably the most read about article right now in every single news event and news article. It's COVID-19 has so many different articles for young students and older students. And if you take that and you add that to engage your learners, then you have an opportunity to really spark discussion. Get them curious about what you're about to teach them. And when they're there, then you start to explore. This is the part that I feel tends to be more difficult to build because you need a lot. You need a lot of resources and resources of different types. You want to meet every single learner, and that's what we call UDL is the Universal Design for Learning, is you want to be able to meet learners. If a learner is naturally prone to video and learns best with video, make sure you have some videos. If a learner is naturally prone to listening, maybe have some podcasts. If a learner is naturally prone and prefers to read, then have some articles to read. But have a variety of different things so that the learners can learn and explore the area before you engage them in the lesson. So here I have, if you're not familiar, a couple of you, I'm not sure if you're still in here, but a couple of you actually mentioned Edpuzzle when we were doing Screencastify, and you were saying that that's a wonderful tool to use. That's a great way to do, to explore content if you're interested in Edpuzzle. They have their own content there. This is linked here, so if you wanted to go there, you can go there. News articles and videos from other sites like Newsella, Mystery Science, YouTube, Time for Kids. Skyping with an expert is huge right now, especially in this remote learning situation. This link right here will take you to a whole database of experts that you can Skype with. And you can talk to people about what they do in their area. So you're basically bringing in, earlier I mentioned bringing in an expert so that students can learn from them now that we don't have really brick and mortar walls anymore. Virtual field trips. My son, who's in preschool, is learning about Crater Lake in Oregon. And I took him there. I went onto Google Earth and I said, let's take a look at this. And I just panned right into it. And I was like, look, this is Crater Lake. You see how blue it is? It used to be a volcano. Let me show you how high it is. And I was able to really show him what that is. So students can do that as well. Google Earth has the ability to create tours where you can send them on a little tour and they can follow you and you can talk about the different things. Really, really wonderful tool. So that's exploring. I'm going to stop right there because there's still a few more sections. I want to make sure that I don't have any questions. I'm going to stop for just a minute to see if anybody's been asking, or are you guys just all out there exploring? Because I know that's how people work. I've been working with adult learners long enough to know that once I put links into a presentation, everyone's just clicking and they're listening. And if you're listening, great. If you're not listening, shame on you. Okay, so let's get back to the HyperDoc lesson. If you have a question, remember that chat is still there and Minhee is helping me out and she's, thank you, Elena. Minhee's helping me out and she's answering the chat questions if I'm not able to get to them. Whitney had a question about Skyping with an expert. It is live. It is live. Isn't it great? You really get to interview an expert if you can. And I have found a lot of book authors doing Skyping because people are reading and they're reading their books and the kids are enjoying their books, and then they realize this is a real person, and then they ask them the purpose behind their book. So Skyping with an expert is a really, really great tool to bring in experts, and they're all on there. So it's a whole list of people that you can look for with many, many different content areas. Okay, so I'm going to move over to explain. Explaining, this is the part, this is the content, this is what would be your lecture, right? Some people, I do like to lecture. You can tell I've been doing 1-hour webinars for the last 4 weeks with you guys. I do like to lecture. I like to lecture because there's something about listening to someone talk and really like addressing things right then and there in the now. So I do like to explain. So in a HyperDoc, sometimes what I will do is I will give my students the engage and the explore part first. Just let them have that maybe for homework. And then the explain is me. They come into class and I do a little tiny lecture, and then I give them, I can record my lecture if I wanted to, but I do the explaining part, and then I give them the rest of the HyperDoc and they finish the HyperDoc after my explain. But I always give them resources for for students who don't like to learn by lecture. I know when I was younger, I would sit in a lecture and I couldn't, I was like the Charlie Brown teacher. It was just wah, wah, wah. And I just couldn't understand. So I needed a video, and I needed something for someone to get back to later, or a text. I could even learn with a textbook. I just couldn't watch somebody lecture. So when you do the explain part of a HyperDoc, you will need to put your resources there in addition to your explaining and your lecture. How do you set anonymous viewers for Google Docs? So I have anonymous viewers because we are not within a domain. We can talk more about that at the end, just because it's a Google Docs specific question, but hold on to that question and then we'll talk about that later. It's a domain situation. So right now, this is a free personal account. Anyone who goes onto my personal account, even if you're my friend, I'll still see you as anonymous. So anybody who is not in my domain. So if you work in a school district and your students are on there and you're using your district account, you'll see their names pop up. But because we are all part of regular plain old Gmail, then I won't see your names up here. That's why I'm seeing that. So we'll go more into detail about that later. Apply. So how do you apply the learning, right? So they've learned about it, they've had a chance to explore, they're really interested now, we got to get them doing something. All good teaching comes from that. All good teaching comes from doing. So Flipgrid has been amazing at giving them opportunities to apply their learning. Ask them a question. You know, I just taught animal adaptation, so I want to know why an animal does this. Tell me why you think an animal does that. Have them create the screencasts. When I did the presentations for Screencastify, I showed you how to set it up and I gave you the resources on how to set it up. The same process can be done for the kids. The kids can add that extension as well. The kids can create Google Slides as well, and the kids can apply their learning to screencasts as well. So they can present the information for you. If you want them to have, you know, maybe they can present something, create a Google slide, present it, and then turn it into Google Classroom, or maybe even just share the link to you. Digital portfolios is a great way to apply learning. You know, create something that shows me that you understand, and then put it in your digital portfolio. Group discussions, that's another great way of having them apply their learning. You do have to, with group discussions, it's easy for certain students to kind of slack off. So there has to be some sort of an accountability measure. You know, you can use the old college, you know, respond by this date and then provide feedback for 2 other peers. That's generally the college standard, but it works. It works when you're trying to facilitate discussion. Movies, I see a lot, and especially in our world language teachers in our district, I see a lot of movies, students making movies. They, for some reason, all have iPhones and at the high school level. And they just, because the iPhone iMovie app is free and it comes with every iPhone and iPad. So the kids just make movies with that, and they have movie trailers as well. So making a movie has so many different problem solving and critical thinking elements to it, that's a wonderful way to apply what you're learning, to make a movie or a movie trailer about a concept that you taught them. Oh, yes, discussion and participation. Whitney, we could talk about that. It might have to be, maybe it'll be a question. So Whitney asked the question of any recommendations on group discussions while distance learning. My students' participation is so low. They are on a Zoom call, but they don't speak much. So there's a couple, earlier we talked about equity. Equity is a huge issue with distance learning right now. There could be a few reasons why you're not getting the student participation. and maybe try and find out what those reasons are, and try different things to see if those are, that's how you would find out. Because if you ask a student, why aren't you participating? They're going to say, I don't know. That's how students work, right? Every student will answer that. But do different things to whittle down what the reason could be. For example, if a student is on a Zoom call and they're not participating, and then you go and you do activities that are asynchronous, where you don't have to be on a Zoom call, and all of a sudden they're turning in all this wonderful work. It could be that behind them during your Zoom calls, there's a dog barking, there's children playing, mom and dad are cooking because they're in the kitchen like I am. So that could be a reason why. Maybe the Zoom itself is intimidating and they can't actually get to it. Another reason is maybe they feel self-conscious. I know one of my colleagues who's a teacher, one of my colleagues is self-conscious about Zoom. And it makes her nervous to the core to lead a Zoom session because she's nervous about if she can't get the technology right, and she's just nervous. And there's really not much you can do because we were all kind of thrown into this position, right? So for participation, I would recommend balancing that synchronous and asynchronous activities. So give them opportunities to do Zoom with you, but then also give them opportunities to demonstrate mastery outside of Zoom in different lessons, in different things that are asynchronous, so that whatever could be the reason why they're nervous about being on Zoom, if they're not talking, maybe create a Google Doc or a Google form where they can type in their answers instead, a private one, so that, because a Google form, when they type in their answers, nobody sees it. So that could be another reason why. And then if you're interested, you can always use Pear Deck. Pear Deck is one of those tools where you lead the lesson and then the students answer. Every student must answer, and you can see if they're not answering. You just do a little private message, say, hey, can you type in your response? It doesn't force them to speak or say anything, and no one can see what they're typing. So it alleviates a lot of the pressure for students who are nervous on Zoom. Whitney, we can chat more if you want to stick around afterwards we can chat more about anything that I mentioned if you want to stick around for a little bit. I'm just going to keep going so that we keep the momentum going. Okay, so we've given them opportunities to apply and now share. Earlier we talked about giving them a chance to have an authentic audience, right? Share, 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 always share. I can't begin to tell you how powerful that is for students. Give them a chance to share, because our kids love sharing. They're oversharers. This is a generation of oversharers. Look at everything that's on TikTok and Instagram. And I mean, everything is out there. People are sharing. I know I do it. Right now I'm trying to grow herbs like cilantro and basil. And I have the tiniest little growth, and I'm on Instagram going, look at my new little plant. We're oversharers by nature. Our kids need to share. So give them that opportunity to share, and it will make the lesson more meaningful for them. So many different ways to share. They can submit it to Google Classroom. They can put it in their digital portfolios. You can send it home in a newsletter. You could tweet it out, put it on Instagram, whatever you decide to do, but give them a chance to share. And then reflect. One of the more powerful reflection pieces I've seen lately, now that we are on distance learning, is podcasts, kids creating podcasts. Lots and lots of kids creating podcasts. And with this one right here, Anchor is an application that has been pretty widely used. It's very easy because a lot of people use it on their phone. So I was using Anchor before when I would do a podcast with my colleague, but we were too busy to do it at work. So we started doing it at home. We would just walk. We would go on our walks and we would hold our phones and we would do our podcast on our phones during the walk. And that's what the kids were doing. And right now there's a huge influx of podcasts on student experiences while dealing with COVID-19. Some of those stories that I was listening to were so powerful. They were the way that they talk about their experiences, it broke my heart for a lot of them. And then also it made me respect what our students are going through so much more. And to have that lens of what they're going through, to hear that, it was so strong to me. And it just really changed. And I think teachers don't are not, this wasn't for me before I started doing this, I was never a podcast person, but now I get why it's so interesting. I'm not sure if anyone else is a podcast person, but just try it. At first I thought, oh, I can't focus, but it seems to work really well. And our students love it. They love the idea of the podcast because they don't have to show their face, which a lot of them are self-conscious about their face, but they just talk and they just tell their stories and they use it like a diary, but they don't have to write, which every student seems to love. So podcasting is really great. I'm actually going to be doing in the next webinar, I'm going to be talking about podcasts and some tools to help with podcasting. Book creator, another webinar coming up. Seesaw already did. Digital portfolio already did. Look at that. We're just ticking off all the tools here. So all these different tools that you can use to allow students to reflect on their learning. And then the last part is the extend their learning. You know your kids, if you did a good job, your kids are going to be so excited about this. Give them an opportunity to do more. This one right here, partner with an expert. That actually happened with my students. We did a presentation on science with the water filtration system, and I challenged them to create a new water filter, and they 3D printed one, and they just went crazy. And then what happened was, after the project was over, the kids had an opportunity to meet with some of the experts and make a proposal for their product and really like pitch it for them. And they ended up working with an organization to create these for third world countries. I'm like, what? So they went in and they started making these, and then they started this charitable project where they were making these filters and donating them to different organizations. So it was just a great way for them to continue the learning and to spark that creativity. And now they're doing good, and you're sparking civic engagement, which is so wonderful and fun. The kids had so much fun. Imagine being able to say that you did that in 5th grade. It was 5th grade that they did that. So really, really great opportunities because of the technology, because we have so many different tools. All right. That's a lot. So we were talking earlier, I'm going to give you some time to just look through these resources, and a couple of things I wanted to show. So I have found that this particular group likes resources. I have some different options for you here for this independent research time. Option 1 is to visit the HyperDocs website. This is the website of the ladies who created HyperDocs, and this is where all of their work is being compiled, and this is where, you know, they talk about the pedagogy and building one. They have classes and all sorts of good stuff there. So that's the website. This is that folder I was telling you about of all those different types of HyperDocs. If you're interested in seeing a bunch of different types of HyperDocs and how they work, go here to this folder, and this will show you all the different HyperDocs for different grade levels and so forth. Now, this is just contributed by teachers, so you will have to be looking at these from a professional lens and really think, is this how I would teach this? You know, at least some of the part is built for you. So when you make a copy of it, you can go on there and delete the things that you would not use and then add things that you do want to use. And then option 3, here I have the template, the Google Docs version of that template. If you want the slides version, it's on slide 10. It's right here. This is the slides version. But if you want to start building and just you have an idea already of how you're going to use it, you can start building one there. When you click on this, you'll have the opportunity to make a copy and then just kind of build a lesson from there. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to hang out in the chat. If you have any questions or anything like that, I'm going to be answering private chats and so forth here and give you a little bit of time. I want to say like 2 minutes because I'm really bad about wait time. And online wait time is just quiet. So 2 minutes is all I'm going to give you. Okay. All right. Go ahead and get started. Start exploring. I'm going to be in the chat if anybody needs me there, or you could just ask questions. About 1 more minute. Okay, so feel free to continue working on the project that you're working on. I'm just going to finish up the presentation real quick. And, you know, it's one of those things where I just gave you a whole bunch of resources and all you need is a little time to dig through everything. So I'm just going to close up really quickly and then stick around to answer questions, but at least you have all the resources with you. So a couple of tips for success. Start with a template. A lot of people struggle a little bit. I like the template because it has the little prompts, and the prompts keep your focus on the purpose of that section, because so easily you can forget the pedagogy and start moving into a document with links. And that's not what the whole purpose of HyperDocs is. The purpose is for them to engage and move through that lesson. So I love starting with that template. I always start, if I'm teaching younger students, I start with the Google Slides. If I'm teaching older students, I start with the Google Doc. So that's one part. Build in participation, collaboration, and multimedia. If you have them working alone, quietly, it's just like working on a worksheet. The beauty of technology is that you can easily add in a video, you can add in the opportunities for kids to talk to each other, for them to collaborate on the same document. You can add in those opportunities for them to, everyone get on one Google Doc and start participating and throwing things together. So build in those opportunities. Google has all of those abilities to do that. Other tips, offer choice. We talked earlier about all those explore features, like give them opportunities. Don't make it required that they go through each and every one of those videos. Give them a choice. Say, here's 7 videos, articles, and slideshows. Pick 4. Pick 4 that you need to really learn from. And they can choose all 4 videos if they want, but they've at least watched 4 resources. So give them choice, but don't overwhelm. That's what I did in the beginning. Is I struggled a little bit because I put in way too many resources for each section. I know about these resources, so I just kept going over and I would add 6 or 7 pieces, and it just overwhelmed the students, and it took too long, and the students lost focus. They forgot what the purpose of the lesson was, and it became just I got to do this, I got to do this, so just really focus on the purpose. Teach them. The first time you do HyperDocs, tell them, okay, I want you to do this, and then I want you to do this. I always do an intro. Even though I've done HyperDocs, I always do this is how I want you to proceed. This is where I want you to, this link right here tells you this. This is what you do. And even though the directions are still there, some kids need to hear it from you as well. We are in a world now where you can collaborate easily online. I have built presentations for major conferences with people who are on the other side of the country, who I've never seen in real life. So collaboration with other teachers is so easy to do. Take advantage of that, because you two can work together on one document, and it's half the work. And then you both have a wonderful document lesson plan. And then most importantly, not every lesson needs to be a HyperDoc. HyperDoc is huge. It's one of those UDL type lessons. It's a gourmet meal. Not every lesson has to be a HyperDoc, and it is a lot of work to build one, but once you've built one and it does what you ask it to do, then you can continue to use that one, share it, trade it with someone to get a different one. But remember that when students need variety, and every lesson doesn't have to be as long as a HyperDoc. Just, I would choose ones that are I would choose ones that are more boring, I guess you could say, that are difficult. You know, students struggle with it. The content is a little bit difficult. So that's what I would make into a HyperDoc. With that being said, this is my contact information. If you need me, you can find me on Twitter. I'm there all the time. There's my email if you need to email me for anything else. And then credits for the slide template as well as the HyperDocs concept is Teachers Give Teachers. So thank you so very much. I am going to stick around. I know Minhee has some survey and things for you, so I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Wren. Feel free to ask questions. You can turn the audio back on, or you can share questions on chat. If you don't have a question, please take a moment to fill out the feedback form. And if you need to leave early, please make sure you visit and fill out the feedback form before you leave the webinar. It seems like most people are done and wrapping up. I'll continue on with announcements. Are you still getting questions, Wren?
I am,
Okay.
but that's fine. I think, yeah, go ahead.
All right. So we are done with 4 out of 8. We are halfway through the webinars. Next week is not the webinar. 2 weeks from now, we'll give Hue-An a week's rest from these webinars. So we're reconvening 2 weeks from today, June 11th, with digital storytelling, and then we have 3 different tools for fostering creativity with multimedia. Looking forward to those. And again, a reminder that for each webinar, a new Zoom link will be sent on Wednesday. And the Center for Creativity and Critical Thinking also has online art workshops and professional development opportunities for K-12 teachers. If you're interested, please check them out. I will share the links on chat. Cal State Fullerton College of Education programs. We have different programs for credential programs, master's programs, and doctoral programs. Again, if you're interested, please visit the link. And that's it from us at the National Resource Center for Asian Languages. We have our contact info there if you have any questions. Now I'll leave this up here just for a couple more minutes. If people have questions, please continue to address them to Hue-An. Lots of great feedback on the chat.
I have a lot of fun presenting for this group. I really do. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we done with questions?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Hue-An, and thank you everyone for joining us. See you all in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.